Real happy to have my next guest on the Sports Card Shop at Moco guest line. He's a fellow content creator and podcaster from the Sports Card Nobody podcast. Shane Norton, welcome.
Thanks so much, Sean. I really appreciate you having me on. And holy moly, is that intro epic? That was fantastic.
Yeah, and like I tell everyone, after the intro, it then it goes downhill.
Hey, you know
From
what?
there.
Grab the attention right off the top and let it carry you through. Fantastic stuff.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, welcome to the show. I know I got to meet you at the National for the first time. We'll talk about that
Sure.
here coming up during the conversation. But it's the age old kind of standard podcast question. Kind of your hobby background. How did it all started for you? Kind of where you started and where you are now. That kind of timeline question.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you're not lying. That is like it's like the trope these days with all the different conversations we have with so many different people in the hobby. But happy to talk about it. Love telling the story because I'm really unique. I collected when I was a kid, then I stopped, and I came back. Nothing special about me there. No, like everybody, or like a lot of us, when I was a kid, I mean, I've always been a collector. I've collected everything. I've collected comic books. I've collected action figures. I collected Pogs when I was a kid. I don't remember a time in my life that I just wasn't attracted to the act of collecting stuff for whatever reason. And so when I was a kid, I collected all different types of cards. I had this one binder that was filled with baseball cards and Marvel cards. And specifically, I had the Marvel Series 4 cards, which when you put them all together in the nine card sheets, it created like a big giant picture. And that whole thing got stolen from me. And that was that's a little bit of trauma from my card hobby or card past I've never quite gotten over. But so yeah, I collected all the way up until high school. Like a lot of us started getting other things. I never stopped collecting in general, but I stopped collecting cards specifically. But then, fast forward to 2018, I was marrying my wife, my amazing wife, and I wanted to get her we had said kind of no gifts for the wedding for each other, but I said, I mean, I still kind of want to get her something. So I got her tickets to a game in Los Angeles. We lived in LA at the time when the Packers were coming into town to face the Rams, and she's a Packers fan. So I decided to buy her tickets, since they'd be in town. But the tickets weren't going to arrive by the time we were getting married. The tickets get released later on, whenever you actually get them in hand. So up until the morning of my wedding, I really didn't know how I was going to present this gift to my wife. I had a bunch of silly ideas in my head, but finally, like the night before, I had this idea that I thought would be pretty cool. So I woke up the day of my wedding and I went to a local Target or Walmart, whatever it is. And, back then it was a lot easier to find cards on the shelves, although I think it's getting better now, which is great. But I grabbed a whole bunch of packs, and what I was looking for was any Aaron Rodgers, and a Todd Gurley. At that time, I didn't know anything about what the card market had become since I was a kid. So I grabbed a whole bunch of packs, maybe even an entire box. And I didn't want to buy them all just to get the 2 cards that I wanted. So I went up to the customer service desk, and I went up to a woman there, and I tried to explain to her, I was like, listen, I'm trying to look for just these 2 cards. Is it okay if I just open these and then not, and when we find the cards, I'll just pay for everything I open? And she was looking at me real side-eyed, totally not understanding what I was trying to say. Her manager comes over and they're like, no, you can't do that. So I reversed again. I was like, all right, listen, I'm getting married in a couple of hours, and this is my idea. As soon as I said the wedding, they were like, oh yeah, we're happy to help. So then they were opening up packs with me. We're just like ripping open whatever packs, quickly shuffling through, looking for an Aaron Rodgers and Todd Gurley card. Finally found them. So paid for every pack that I had ripped open. And I took those 2 cards and I basically wrote a nice little letter saying, whatever, we're going to the game. And I attached those to the letter. And those were kind of like the tickets that I didn't have in hand. So that was my way of representing it. So now the wedding goes great. Everything's awesome. Stacy loved the letter and the cards, or loved the tickets and whatnot. But when the wedding was over and we were packing up and we were getting ready to leave, I kept those cards because I'd had some success in my fantasy football league that I'm pretty serious about. Todd Gurley was actually a key player to me winning my first championship. Maybe it was my second. I forget. There were so many, but I decided to keep it to kind of represent that moment in my fantasy football thing. So then that became me curious about other cards. So I went out and got a David Johnson card, really low end stuff, score, retail stuff, nothing crazy. So a couple bucks I'm spending on these cards. So I bought, Christian McCaffrey at some point too. But then that opened up the floodgates, right? I started investigating. Oh, can I get something a little bit cooler? Realize, oh, there's like rookie patch autos I can get of these guys that are a little still lower level, and I'm only paying 30 to 60 bucks for them. A little bit more money than I expected to spend for a card. But so that's kind of what really opened the floodgates. And then in 2019, I decided to start buying baseball cards. The Dodgers were doing really well. I'm a huge Dodgers fan, and then it really became like I was really kind of dipping my toes in. And then, like a lot of people, when the pandemic hit, I kind of was like, okay, I've been doing this, but on a low level, kind of scratching the surface. And I decided to really just start going all in on it, and it just became what it's became, like it has for so many people.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like I love the story with the wedding. But once you mention the word wedding, it's funny how people's demeanor
Yeah,
can change. You're probably just saying, I should have probably said that right off
yeah,
the jump. It would have went a little smoother.
right.
But a cool thing to do, and without having the tickets in hand. And who knew then, right, that it was going to sort of light those fires once again. And obviously, then with baseball and being a Dodger fan, and and here we are in 2022, and you're in the content creation side.
Yep.
You launched Sports Card Nobody in November of 2021. I got to ask you if you've explained it. I apologize, I didn't hear the explanation, but why the term nobody? Because I'm before you answer, I believe everybody is somebody in the hobby. I don't care where your collection is, from high end to quarter cards. It does, we're all in the same hobby. I think I know what you're gonna say, but I wanted to get it straight from the source. Why, when you were coming up with the name of the show, how did the nobody part come about?
Yeah, yeah. So really what happened was when I was diving in deeper and really trying to educate myself a little bit more, like a lot of people, especially in this day and age, first thing I'm doing is hitting up YouTube. I'm Googling, finding content creators who are talking about this stuff and trying to see what's what. And what I think like a lot of folks, I came across Sports Card Investor who makes a ton of content, ton of high quality content. But his show, coupled with a bunch of others, actually, I mean, it wasn't just him, but what I realized was these folks were really playing at a level that was completely unattainable to me. So, and one of the big sort of like catalyst for me wanting to start my own content and where the actual title came from was there was one specific show, a Sports Card Investor, where he was making a trade, where Jeff Wilson was making a trade. I think it might have been at the National, not this previous year, obviously, but the year before. It could have been a different show. It doesn't matter. But he was making a trade that amounted to something like $20,000 worth of cards exchanging hands. And I saw that, and it was just, to me, was wild. I mean, that is like an insanely different level. And it was hard to find stuff and voices of folks who really kind of like me cared more about the collecting side. I like to collect because I like the stories. I talk about this all the time. I'm trying to express a part of myself. I'm trying to form this little silly cardboard story with my collection. You come in here and you see my Sandy Koufax, you see my Bret Hart stuff, you see my Mookie Betts stuff. You start to get some sort of a picture about things that I enjoy, things that I might somewhat define myself by, even though they're not that important. I'm a dad first and all those sorts of things. But, these little parts of myself that I'm expressing, these passions that I have. And it really felt like most of the content that I was coming across at that time was more garnered towards the investment and the flipping side. And that's great. I mean, that's huge. I mean, there's a huge market for that. It is a driving factor of why the hobby can get to where the levels that it gets to, but it just wasn't me. So as I started to think about creating my own content and things that I was hoping to talk about and the way I was going to hope to eventually shape myself, I had to, at that time, I had no idea how to find my voice and although, anything of that nature. But it just, I wanted to differentiate myself. I wasn't going to be an investor. I wasn't going to be a flipping voice. And those weren't the things I was going to go after. What I really wanted to go after was education for myself. I say this quite a bit too, where I started the content selfishly. I just wanted to force myself to get even deeper than I had. I wanted to force myself to kind of come out of even the little shells that I can be in. I want to talk to people. I want to reach out to folks and have them on the show or like this, where I'm sitting here talking with you, where I can really start to get smarter about the hobby, start to figure out the things that really matter to me in the hobby. So that way to differentiate myself sort of became, I'm kind of a nobody compared to these folks, and that's fine. Own that, enjoy it, make it bright and colorful, and be the nobody that is having fun and still enjoying this, and maybe become a voice of at some point for folks who look at some of those other content creators and think to themselves, that's not real.
Well, listen, I get it, and I appreciate you. Like, it makes sense, kind of the way you explained it, right? But that lower end, if you want to call it that, or the regular transactions, those are the majority, really,
Yep.
Shane. You know what I mean? That those high end deals, while they are important to the hobby and they are part of the fuel that makes the car go, it's a smaller percentage overall. So I think the area, and I'll include myself, that we're sort of in. Now I've bought expensive cards, but more often than not, they're going to be under four figures. Usually the Nationals where I buy one or two cards over four figures, if that, and that's sort of what I look forward to in the National. But most of the year, I'm under the four figure mark, whether it be selling or buying, with exceptions here and there. And I think that's the bigger part of the hobby. Sure, it
Sure.
doesn't grab as many the headlines as a mantle that's about to sell for over
Mm-hmm.
$10 million, but those transactions are far less. They make more news, but they're far less of them than the everyday transactions that most of us make. So I get the
100%.
the play on words with nobody, but as far as I'm concerned, you're somebody. I'm sure a lot of other people feel the same way. I get it as part of the show title, and I know it's tongue in cheek, but
Right.
without all that facets of the hobby, whether it be high end deals and your everyday deals, they're all important to the fabric of the hobby to it going forward, and probably even more so now with some of the market corrections and
Mm-hmm.
prices sort of resetting, and I think it's all the more important. But I get it. And you touch on something I was going to compliment you on. One of the things that drew me to you in your show is, and I try to be like that, is I try to be like myself.
Sure.
I am myself. And I think that's the people can tell when someone's being genuine and someone's being, kind of phony-ish or shtick, or, maybe even playing a role almost like an actor. And like I said, when I just be myself. Some people may love the show, and some people it may not be a big fan, but one thing they can never criticize me for is not being genuine. Even if you don't like this show or whatever, uh, your show I feel is fits this narrative too. Is we're ourselves, right? And so whether
100%.
someone likes us or doesn't like us, and hopefully likes us, and
Yeah.
I think that is the majority of the case. But no one can say, hey, this person's you know playing a role, or
Right.
you know just trying to get clicks and downloads, and
Right.
not really standing behind what they say. And I could tell early on with you from the first episode I heard, and that's really, I hate to say it like this, I don't know. I think it was the norm at one point, but I think because there's so much content out there that sometimes I think newer shows try to they're trying to fight off
Mm,
competition. I hate to put it, I got in 2018 when there was a lot less shows, and I guess it was easier for me to be myself because there was less. Listen, let's be honest, less people swimming in the water, so
sure. Yeah, big
less
time.
competition. But I think if I was to start a show now I would still be myself, because that's just how I was brought up. But I think for certain other people jumping in the pool, as I like to say, I think it's difficult, and so they're trying to stand out, and sometimes the content. They try to do it through content or posturing or what have you. So the folks that do it, what I kind of deem the right way, in my opinion, those are the ones that stand out to me, especially now, because I think a lot of it's kind of a lot of, I don't want to say a lot, but some of it's smoke and mirrors. I don't want
For
to
sure.
paint everyone with the same brush, but I think some of it's smoke and mirrors and just for clicks and sort of playing a role. And I know you don't do that. I don't do that, and I think people appreciate that. I know I've gotten compliments that, hey John, one of the things I love is, yeah, I know you're being you, and I don't have to, even if I don't agree. I've had people say, I don't necessarily agree with everything you
Right.
say, but I also know you believe in what you're talking about, and that's your opinion. I don't have to second guess you if you're just saying that for the shock value of it, or to for the sake of saying it. So,
Yeah.
that was something I picked up your vibe very early on. I think genuineness goes a long way. I think most people uh, appreciate it. I think most people who are genuine themselves or true to themselves appreciate when others are like that. You got that other fact, the other segment that maybe not, but it is to each their own,
Yeah.
as they say. What made you launch? But what was it that said, "Hey, I want to do this, and I can do this." What was the kind of the factor that set the wheels in motion there?
So, I mean, I've always my career is sort of based in more traditional content creation. I work in television, so I've been involved with content creation, for a very long time now, since college, and 15 years of my career at this point. So I kind of know, a little bit of what it takes to make something, to produce something. Um, so once, I've always wanted to get more involved with my own creativity, my own expression of myself, because I've made television, and that's usually other people's stories that I'm telling. And I always had an interest in doing something for myself. It was always a matter of finding something that I was passionate enough about, to really go after and make, constant, consistent content around. So once the cards really started to take over, with my hobbying, because like I said, I mean, I've collected so many different things, and once this became the forefront of what I really wanted to give my all to, and I realized, and from what I had seen at the time, that there was definitely a hole in the content creation that I thought I could fill. It just kind of made sense to give it a shot. I enjoy it. I love the cards. I love this hobby. So, give me an excuse to talk about it, and again, to force myself to get deeper into it. Um, so that's really where that came from, which is kind of like my own sort of background in more traditional content creation. But to touch on something you said too, I mean, I completely agree that being authentic and being real is as important to anything, in any aspect, right? But when it comes to the content creation, one of the tough parts too is not only trying to remain authentic, but trying not to be overly influenced. And you're right, there's so many different shows and so many different, whether it's YouTube, podcasts, there's so many different avenues, and all these things can really start to shape the way you go about something, even if you don't realize or if it's intentional. And that's even true with our collecting, right? We talk about so many different creators talk all the time about really trying to drown out the noise and don't collect what other people are telling you to collect. Try to find the lane that's important to you. Try to find, the cards that tell your story, or, whatever it is that you like. And that's important. And I think that early on when I first started, I first started with a YouTube channel. That was, because television is more up my lane. And as I was trying to figure out what that was and the different things I wanted to cover, it was tough not to be influenced by other content creators. And I didn't have the time to keep up with the YouTube channel because the way that I wanted to produce it, it was just too time consuming. And that eventually evolved itself into the podcast. And it took some time. And, I'm only 35, 36 episodes in or whatever I'm at now. And I'm still trying to find my own voice. I'm still trying to figure out the way that I want to come across every episode and, figure out the stories that I want to tell. It's sort of an evolving thing, as you continue to do it.
Well, another thing I appreciate, you have younger kids, and you try to, you mentioned being a dad first, which is as a dad, I appreciate that. My son's older, at 22 now, 18 when I kind of started the show, but I appreciate that. This hobby, I think you kind of know where I'm going here, and you might agree, right? It can consume you if you let it. I see a lot of, I don't want to say a lot, but some content creators, I've seen them, when they kind of first started, and they, post pictures of their family and different things they were doing. And then as their shows kind of took off, like many do, you see less of that. It's just all cards and whatnot. I'm not trying to say they're bad parents or whatnot, but the hobby's a monster in itself that can kind of
Mm,
overwhelm and consume you. I've had dealer friends of mine, even a non-content creation, but I've had a dealer friend or two get divorced just because they were traveling so much on a show circuit, and literally they're guys I would set up with, and I could see the progression where their relationship was starting to deteriorate. I think that can happen. We've seen it happen in content creation. We've seen divorces in the space, where I'm not saying that a show in itself is the only reason why, but I'm sure that's one of the factors as people can grow apart. But one thing I love what that you do, Shane, is you talk about being a dad. You talk about your kids. You share the hobby as much as you can with them, and and like you said, you put your family first, and even with an older son, in my case, I still have a wife, and I still got a responsibilities to honor and live up to, and so there's a balance with what we do, and I think you do a decent job with it. I think I do. At least my wife, at this point, says I do. So there was even a stretch with this show, Shane. I've talked about it on this show. There was a stretch, I'd say, in the between like the episodes, 40, 50, and 60, where I was doing like so much every day with it.
mm.
Where my wife even made a comment at that time. Oh, nice to see you. I'd come downstairs,
Sure.
and she, in a nice way, she was, kind of let me know, like, hey, you're really starting to, really dive in there head first, and I'm not seeing you as much, and blah blah. And sometimes you don't even know it until someone else, just makes you aware. I think the message was sent, and we got on the same page. I think where the
Good.
problem can happen is when that message is sent and and you don't receive it, or you don't care about the
Right.
message. And I think you do, kind of speak to the balance of,
Sure.
I know you, like you said, you did it as part of your real job too, but when it becomes even more than your real job, but your sort of your hobby, where you start your own show and being a dad and a husband, talk about the balance and maybe sometimes the difficulties of that even.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not to try to give advice about like being married. I mean, every relationship's different. Everybody's got to find, that what works for them, but nothing original with what I'm about to say. But the most important thing really comes down to communication. And with my hobby and, whether it's the content creation or the actual collecting of the cards themselves, I talk to my wife about it a lot. I ask her opinion. I ask her, a lot about our schedules, especially when it comes to trying to schedule interviews. Like you and I took some time to actually get this time and date locked down because I got to make sure it works with my family and the things that I've already committed to. So I really am open with everything. I'm I never I see these posts a lot, and I hear people say like, "Man, if my wife only knew what I was spending on this card, or if my wife knew what I that's never me. My wife is aware. She I mean, she trusts me that I'm not I'm not spending too much money. And she actually doesn't really care. She doesn't care about the card. She doesn't This is the one hobby I've actually dove the most into that she's the least interested in. And she's kind of lamented the fact that I really wish you were still collecting hot toys. I like those way better. Um, but yeah, I mean, I talk to her. I don't schedule anything unless I talk to her first, especially if it's out of the norm, because I record weekly on Monday nights after my kids go to bed, so I can help do bath time or whatever it is, or it's my turn to put them down, whatever the routine is. So once they're down on Mondays is when I can sit down and record. Um, and I just kind of stick to that. I try not to take on too much. I try to be cognizant of that. And, to be honest, I mean, my time with my family means more to me than any of the other stuff. So if I'm taking time away from them, I feel it. And it's tough because, the balancing isn't just, there's other things, that our lives encompass, right? There's so many things going on, and, we get busy and sometimes, so I just really try to, selfishly spend as much time with my family as I can because I love to. And you mentioned about, getting my kids involved with the hobby. So for those that don't know, I'm sure there's a lot more people listening to this that have never heard of me before. I have two kids. I have a 3.5-year-old, and my son turned one yesterday on August 12th. We're having his birthday party tomorrow. So we're actually kind of getting ready for that party and all that, but whatever. So my daughter's the one that I can kind of get involved with the hobby. And I try to find any way that I can. I let her handle my cards, especially the ones that are in top loaders or slabbed. I mean, she can only do so much damage to those. And I let her, she likes to organize them. She likes to look for the ones, the pinky purple ones that stand out to her. She likes to grab and organize my Bret Hart cards. She digs that. She really has fun with it. And then when there's cards that I can let her keep, cards that aren't valuable, that she's going to mess them up, whatever. It's not the end of the world. I let her have a ton of cards. And something that I've been doing is fairly recently that I've adored both times. A little bit of backstory. I'm a little bit strange about having pictures and video of my kids on the internet. I'm not ready for that. I want to wait till they're old enough for that to happen. So really, if you were to go to my Facebook, you won't see any pictures of my kids. You probably wouldn't even realize I'm a dad, which is weird. Unless there's sometimes just pictures where you can't see their faces, whatever. It's just how I feel more safe about the internet. But on my Instagram page, my Sports Card Nobody Instagram handle, it's mostly card stuff. Obviously, it's what it's dedicated for. But twice now, and just last night I was able to do the second one. I've received I subbed a bunch of cards to SGC to get graded. They came in, and I do the reveals with her. I like to open them up on Instagram Live. And so what I do is I just, the camera's just on the card. So you see her little tiny hands come in, and she, I'm talking to her and try to get her to talk, to the people that she doesn't even probably understand, or, the 4 people that are watching. And, she'll flip the cards over for me, and we'll, she'll see me get excited about a grade or whatever, or not. And that's another way that I'm just trying to get her involved as much as possible. Again, whether she ever likes cards or not, I mean, it'd be great if she does, but it's awesome that I get to spend that time with her. I really looked forward to that. And I didn't want to open those cards and reveal those grades until we could actually do it together. It's stuff that's important to me, whether it's corny or awesome or whatever. It matters to me. So I make it matter on a day-to-day, basis if possible.
Yeah, totally get, not having them in pictures and on film. I understand that in today's world, and some of the things going on there, it makes sense. And you're not the only one. And I mean, I'm a teacher by trade
Yeah,
now,
that's
teacher's
right.
assistant, and as much as I would love to post a photo of my group of kids. We can't do that, and
Right.
for obvious reasons. So I get it, and there's just some crazy folks out there,
Yeah.
unfortunately, and it's better to err on the side of caution. I love that you shared that the unboxing of the grading process with your daughter. Like you said, that's just her hands on
Yeah.
camera, but you can hear her, learn with
Yeah.
you, and hope she likes cards as she gets older. You have your 1 year old son. That's he's got time, but I'm sure he'll, maybe by osmosis. That's kind of what happened with my son. That just because you're interested in it, he'll
Right.
take some sort of interest. What level remains to be determined.
Right.
And but like you said, it's family first, and you wait till your kids are sort of winding down or in bed or sleeping to start producing your program. I've said on this show, the content creation sort of replaced my varsity coaching career as I
Mm.
moved on from that, which was actually more time consuming than content creation.
Sure.
So I have, believe it or not, I have more time since I don't coach high school sports anymore. But we have a whiteboard. I've talked about this on the show. I have a whiteboard that's downstairs in the kitchen. It's a calendar, a whiteboard calendar, erasable calendar, and like you, anything like whether it be interviews or I'm on another show or whatever the case may be, when I have something to do, it's got to go on that counter, and it's also like you would say, it can't interrupt anything we've already got
Right.
uh, to do, whether it be an event or stuff around the house or what might have you. So if it can be scheduled and not interfere with anything that is important or already exists, then I can do it. And I think like you mentioned the word communication, right? You hear the old
Yes.
cliche, right?
Yep.
Communication is key, but it's really so true. We might hear it so much, we almost don't hear it. Kind of falls on,
Sure.
but it really is true. Like my wife said, listen, she's not into cards, like almost like probably like you were saying with your wife. She's supportive of me and the passion I have, and that's the only thing. She said, "Listen, you got an interview. If you schedule, we don't have anything planned, then awesome. I just don't want to, have it where I have to cancel stuff or we have to
Right.
cancel
Yeah. No way.
stuff, and it's never, since we started that whiteboard. Um, it's really streamlined that whole thing, and it's made a world of difference. And like I said, there was a short time period where I sort of lost sight of some things. You don't even realize it, and it's just simple fixes too that can really right that ship and get you back on the same page. And it's you got to think about that. And even if you're not, like, we're talking about content creation and in our collecting of cards. But even
Right.
if you weren't in content creation, just how far you travel for shows, and
Sure.
how often you're not home or going to the car, all that stuff is factor. You got to balance it out, and I think it's important. I think most people do a pretty good job. I'll include us too in that category. But you hear every once in a while, you hear a story where someone didn't, and
Mhm.
maybe kind of either cost them a relationship, or even I've heard people lost their jobs over it because they were caught like not doing their work and doing the stuff they do for fun at work. And you got to get your priorities right. You got to get your
100%. Yep.
priority. So that's another thing. Like I said, that's why I brought it up, because I know you've talked about it, and I think you sort of a great example of how to do it, and that sort of thing. So I'm glad to sort of pick your brain there. And that sort of thing. I know you have a lot of wrestling cards. You enjoy wrestling cards, but I did hear you mention recently you sort of want to pivot a little bit from that. Just kind of maybe elaborate a little bit more what you mean there.
Sure. Well, it's funny. If people were to go to my show or my Instagram page, especially, you might think I only collect wrestling cards, and to some extent that's become true. And to kind of give a little bit about background on that is, I mean, I'm a huge wrestling fan. I have been since I was a kid. I mean, I love wrestling. I think it is a phenomenal industry, phenomenal business. Um, that is so unique and separate from any other type of entertainment that exists. Somehow, this pretend fighting, this art form has just found a way to exist. And I just eat it up. Just no, 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 no. Give it all to me. But so the collecting of the wrestling cards is a very genuine passion of mine. But really, what happened was um, AEW, and for folks who might not know, WWE is the preeminent wrestling organization in the world. It probably always will be. But AEW came into existence about 3 years ago, and then it got delayed. But finally, toward the start of this year, AEW's first cards were coming out. Now, I actually typically watch AEW more than WWE for a lot of reasons, which we don't need to get into here. But nonetheless, I was very excited for that. I'd been collecting my baseball cards, my football cards, my basketball cards, and I was really excited that a wrestling product was coming out for a show that I was now watching weekly. Um, and then as I was still discovering, you kind of always do, like you said, there's so many different shows, but I was still discovering other content creators. And I discovered Stacking Slabs, which is hosted by Brett McGrath, which is a great show. If anybody hasn't checked it out, it's definitely worth a listen. But he talks a lot about wrestling cards on there. So hearing him talk about the WWE cards that he collects started to kind of open up my eyes to that there's more to the wrestling aspect of the hobby than I realized. And I got the AEW cards and I love them, but again, I'm a lifelong fan. So I still love the WWE, even though I watch AEW more often lately. Especially a lot of the legends. So I started to get curious, and then I discovered another podcast called Worlds Collide with Zan Morning and Tony Vella. Absolutely, it's wrestling specific. That's all they talk about, and it's just fantastic. It's just full of information. So now I realized, wow, there's this whole world and this whole community. I should start getting some wrestling cards. So then I went down the rabbit hole, and usually after I bought the AEW box and ripped that, I had a lot of fun. But I started to fall down into wanting to find things that actually meant a lot to me. And Bret Hart is my all-time favorite wrestler. I'm currently wearing a Bret Hart t-shirt right now. I absolutely adore Bret Hart. So I started to look up different cards I could find of his. I'd gotten a couple. I got a Transcendent piece of his, which is an autograph card. It's a high-end Topps product that comes out for those that are unaware. And then it just sort of started to really grow. And then what happened was I went to a show at Mohegan Sun here in Connecticut, where I live. It was a card show that is hoping to be a pretty big Connecticut-based show. I went to that, and I came across someone that I knew, a dealer that I knew, Alex at Ideal Cards. I'd been to his shop, but I came upon his booth, and in his booth, he had 5 different 2020 Topps Finest gold cards. I knew that set was well received, I guess is a good way to put it. But I saw it and I was immediately enamored. It was the first time I'd seen the cards in person. I'd seen them online, I'd seen them, different places. But first time I saw them in person, and he had a Bret Hart one. I mean, the cards that he had were all legends. It was Bret Hart, The Undertaker, Triple H, The Rock. I think he had a John Cena, whatever it is. So I looked at him and I said, well, I want to buy these, and to try to make this story, as concise as possible. I was actually looking for a card for a bet that I lost for a friend of mine, and he's a big Undertaker fan. So that seemed to fit the bill for that. So I started looking at them all though. And I said to Alex, the dealer, I was like, what are you looking for these cards? And then, what are you looking for all of them? I'll just buy them all. So we came to a price that I was absolutely like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. 100% I'm buying these. I didn't truly know the values of the cards at that point, but I just knew that I loved those cards. It was definitely going to satisfy the bet that I lost. And I would have some cards to kind of take home for myself from a show. I got home with those cards, and I was immediately jealous I was going to have to give one of them away. And that set specifically, the 2020 Topps Finest set, became a full-on obsession at that point. Became when I started to collect. And, really a big factor to that too is the level of card that you can get. So rarity, numbered to 10, numbered to 5, even numbered to 50 golds, and the names on the cards: The Rock, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, full on GOATs, Roman Reigns, who's, the greatest wrestler going right now. He's by far the biggest name in the business at this time. They were way more affordable. You look at the baseball versions of those cards. Good luck getting those cards for even close to what the WWE cards cost. So the budget became a major factor in why I kept collecting these cards. And then it just became I wanted to collect in this set the wrestlers that mattered to me or mattered to the business. Um, and so that became my hunt. And I'd been doing that uh, I mean, ever since that show was. So I mean, I don't know, 5 months that I'm into it now, and I've built out a really nice set. I'm sure there's people with better versions of the set than me, but I'm pretty proud of where I've gotten. So when you get to the question, long story short, too late here. Your question about why I'm somewhat pivoting. It's not a really a like I'm desperately trying to get away from wrestling cards. The thing is, I have other passions. I love baseball. I want to still be buying baseball cards, but as I kept putting all of my money into wrestling cards, it was making that impossible to do. And now that this set has reached a point that I'm pretty thrilled with it, I intend to keep going after those cards. I intend to keep upgrading anywhere I can. So if I have a number to 50 orange and I can get that a number to 10 gold, I'm going to do that. But I just posted a picture today of like Clayton Kershaw gold foil card that I was able to pick up at a really good price the other day. It's important to me that I still have pieces that still represent other parts of me. I love collecting cards of all kinds, not just wrestling. I love the wrestling community, though. I love the wrestling cards, and I intend to really keep collecting those. I just ripped a box of Select that just came out yesterday, but I do just want to get back to some of the other things that I still care about. I still love football, I still love basketball, I still love baseball, I still love Marvel. I like Marvel cards. So yeah, that's kind of really where it's come from. I think I'm neglecting other things that I love just as much.
Yeah, and you found a design with those gold
Mm.
tops, those 2020 gold finest. And if you've never seen them, check them out. You'll find out why Shane, like many other people, fell in love with them. They do pop, and yeah.
So I
So
just
I
held up
get it.
a red for those who don't have the
Yeah,
YouTube or aren't watching on YouTube, but just
yeah.
held one up.
Yeah, so I get that. I've had certain cards or certain subsets or whatever the case may be, where you sort of like that becomes almost your almost your sole purpose. Where I don't want to say you forget, but you sort of neglect or you move
Hmm.
away from other things you sort of still love too, and you kind of get caught up in the whirlpool. And then when you sort of build up what you're going after. You've built up a decent inventory. Like you said, it's always nice to kind of revert back and kind of catch back up. In this case, for you, other sports that you still love, other players that you still love collecting. I get it because I've been there and done that. Sometimes you don't even realize it till you're really up to your knees in it.
Yeah.
It's still fun. I mean, obviously,
Yep.
whatever you're chasing is fun, but then sometimes you're like, you know, I did that with some Jackie Robinsons,
Mm.
um, where I should have been buying Jackie Robinsons and I got caught up in other stuff. And when I came back, those Jackie Robinsons were all of a sudden a lot more money than I remembered them at. So sometimes it can cost you in your wallet or checkbook if your timing's your
Sure.
timing's wrong. So I totally get it. I've done it with different whether it be a subset or a certain set I was fond of or singles. I was sort of just trying to stockpile, and then you forget about other things.
Yeah.
The nice thing is you can always, come back and revisit it. Sometimes that might be more expensive than you remembered, and sometimes it works the other way. Like, oh, these have actually come down in price, and
Sure.
so it can work either way. Timing is everything. So I get it. I kind of I thought that's what you meant by when I heard it on your show. You speaking of shows, we just attended the National in Atlantic City. It was my third. It should have been my fourth, and then we know COVID canceled the previous one that was supposed to be in Atlantic City. Your first one, kind of your
Hmm.
thoughts. I'm sure a lot of people kind of told you going in what to expect, but until you really experience it for yourself, you really truly don't know. So just sort of I know you talked about it on your show, but for those listening to us here on this conversation, what you thought of your first national.
Yeah. So the way that I describe the national, I think is pretty simple. It's a lot. It's a lot of walking, it's a lot of people, it is a lot of inventory of cards, it's a lot of activity. It's it's a lot. Everything about it is just a lot. Um, but it is also everything you hope for from a card show. I mean, the amount of inventory is insane. Odds are, although I actually had a little bit of bad luck with this, but odds are if there's something you're looking for, you're going to find it there. You're going to find something similar. Um, you're going to find a lot of great conversations with dealers, conversations with other people who are just attending the show, whether it's just walking the floor and you start chatting with someone, or at the trade night. I went to the big trade night they had, but there were multiple versions of that. There was also a trade lounge in the middle of the floor that you could attend every day. So a lot of great conversations you can have, a lot of opportunities for education. I feel like no matter how much you know about this hobby, there's more to know. So being there was a great way to start to open up your own eyes about things that you're unaware of. Um, so it was, I mean, overall, I mean, it was tremendous. I really loved being there. I really loved spending my time there. I'm already trying to figure out if I can go to Chicago. We just talked about this. Family's important. I'm trying to, my wife and I are talking about if we can turn that into a vacation for both of us, but I can also go to the show, but we'll see how it all works out. Um, so it was great. Now, the reason though that I had the most fun was one of my biggest priorities was trying to, whatever the word is, network, meet people, build relationships, whatever. I was really hoping to do that. I've formed a lot of relationships in the virtual pretend world that is social media. I've had conversations with people pretty regularly that I had never met. I listen to your show. I listen to the Worlds Collide podcast. I listen to the Cousins Collectibles podcast, and um, I wanted to get a chance to meet a lot of these individuals that I've either listened to or chatted with regularly, and that really happened in spades. I met so many people. I attended the panel that you hosted, where you had the Cousins Collectibles on there, and Sports Balt, who was somebody I had actually I was unfamiliar with. So getting to meet him was incredible. I attended another panel later that same night that was a wrestling card specific panel. I got to meet Tony Vella, who's one of the Worlds Collide guys and runs WrestlingTradingCards.com. Got to meet two folks from the Card Foundation podcast, which is a tremendous wrestling podcast. Man, doing all that was just fantastic. I met Chris Brancato, who is somebody who I've met through the wrestling community, who's just a collector. But we made it a point, like, let's link up at the show. And then I saw him a week later when I went to go meet Bret Hart. We've been making these plans. So building real relationships on top of the virtual relationships was great. It was everything I could have hoped for from it. Um, there was a couple things about the national I didn't love. We paid for the VIP. My buddy and I, who went together, suplexes and slap shots. My buddy Justin, we went together. And we bought the VIP tickets. I was a little about the VIP tickets. That probably could have been a little bit better. This has been talked about ad nauseum at this point, but the service and the Wi-Fi options were pretty atrocious when we were there, which made it hard when you get separated from people trying to text them and you realize that text never went through. Just to figure out where they are is a little annoying. Atlantic City itself wasn't the best. I'd heard a lot of people complaining that it was going to be there. Selfishly, I was stoked because it's in my backyard. I could drive there. So for my first national, it made it a lot easier to make that plan. But I hadn't been to Atlantic City in probably pushing 20 years, and it wasn't wonderful. I'm curious if I can go to Chicago. Everybody raves about that area and what it's like. I'm really curious if that holds up. If I can go, it would be great. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's what my national thoughts in a nutshell. I definitely had a blast, and I would love to go back if possible.
Yeah, you make a great point, right, about learning, right? I've been doing this a long time. I'm an old guy, and I always say I try to learn something every day, every week, and if I don't, that's on me. That's a lack of pursuit on my part. The hobby has changed so much from 1979 when I started as a little kid to now, and it heck, it's changing. You know this, Shane. From it changes by the week even now. So
Yeah.
anyone that says they're not learning, or my favorite one is I know everything. I
Mhm.
don't. You could that could be actually true, which
Sure.
it's not.
Maybe.
But let's hypothetically, even if it was true, the hobby has changed today from yesterday. So you
Right.
had to learn something today to know everything, to keep
Yep.
up knowing everything. And so I always laugh when I hear that. It doesn't You don't hear it that often, but every once in a while someone makes that claim, right? If you're not learning in this hobby, I don't care how long you've been involved, 30 something years, 2 years, 1 year, whatever. If you're not learning, you're not paying attention, is
Agreed.
what I always say. And so I am, just because I have a passion too. So I learn, uh, uh, if not every day, almost every day. And you almost have to try not to not. And so that's a great point. And again, it has nothing to do with years of service in the hobby. It's just the hobby is on that sort of new cycle, and the way it's going, that you can learn something every day. You touched on meeting people, right? You get to know people in that online form, but
Hmm.
it's always nice to meet them in person and see if the person, the online personality matches the in person. And I always get this when someone meets me, like maybe for the first time. They're like, "You're just like I hear on your show," and I'm like, "I don't know what you expected." Like, I'm not. I laugh because I'm like, "What did you? I'm uglier in person. That I can't help. It is what it is. But everything else it's the same. Like, there's no what we talked about being that genuine. So I'm not sure what I always chuckle at that and sort of try to ask him, like, what did you think I was gonna say, or and that sort of thing. But it's always like you said, it's always great to meet in person, and you feel like I hate to say it like this, but sort of consummated that friendship, right?
Yeah.
Kind of
No, that's a
made
great
it
way to put
made
it.
it yeah, made it sort of official. And
Yeah. We cards
I
together. You know.
every national I've met someone for the first time or again, which is and both of those situations are equally fun, right? I call it. I mean, the national, like you said, if it isn't there, it may not exist. I mean, almost everything's there. But the other thing is, it's where you're going to have. It's what I call it the Super Bowl, the hobby,
Hmm.
and it's where you're going to have the most people in one place from the hobby 1 week every year at the same time. And whether that's just collectors, content creators, corporate, all facets are equally represented. And I try to go. It's a place I'm going to try to get to every year, whether it be for the full week or 3 to 4 days or whatever. With my career change being in the teaching profession now, you get summers off unless you want to work summer school, which I did work this year. But I tell my employees, like, there's a week every summer that I probably can't work, and it's pretty much the same week, the same along the same dates, the end of
End of July.
July and front part of August. So if you want me to work summer school and you can cover me for 4 days, which is really what it is, for 3 to 4 days, depending on what day I leave for it, then you can have me for summer school. And there's such short, I hate to say it like this, but there's such a demand and shortage that they're willing to, at this point, they're willing to work with that. And so I'm counting my blessings there. I hope to see, you mentioned sort of working Chicago into a family vacation slash I can attend the national trip. And that's really what Atlantic City was this year for me, because my wife went. She could care less about the convention center and the cards and that aspect, but she hung out at the beach for 5 days or what have you. And had a great time. Didn't touch a card, and I had a great time and didn't touch any sand. So it worked out. It worked out for both of us. And if you can do something, work sort of will work along those lines. I hope I get to see you again in Chicago. So just one last question. I sometimes ask this question to the guests on this show. I call it the hobby magic wand. I give it to you. You only get one wish or one kind of command. you can either something you want to see more of, or something you want to get rid of or see less of. What would you use your one thing with the hobby magic wand?
All right, man. So that, I mean, there's a tremendous question. And for me, I've talked about this on my show a few times. I try not to harp on it though. So I've had a couple episodes about it. But man, I wish I could clean up the negativity and sort of the judgmental attitudes that can really pervade a lot of conversations. Um, one of the things that really kind of I get a little pet peeved about, and I try to walk away from as much as possible. But quick example is it wasn't that long ago that Panini released their first WWE product, and it was Prism. We knew in the wrestling community that Prism was going to bring a ton of new folks into the WWE or wrestling space that didn't really care so much about wrestling, but they care about Prism. Um, and that happened. And there was so much hype when it dropped. And cards were selling at pretty high prices. There was a couple. I mean, really, I mean, a few record-breaking prices, if I remember correctly. But there was a couple one-of-one cards that sold for $15,000, right? And seeing people in other avenues see that and just immediately call like the person who bought that dumb, stupid, whatever. Like that's never going to be worth more than that. That's stupid. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe that card won't sell for more than that, but maybe that person has the money and they just bought a card that they love and they were up against other people who were trying to bid or what, got it to that price, so who cares if that card's never going to be worth $15,000 or $100,000 or whatever? If this person did what they're supposed to do, took care of their priorities, has the money, I don't know, it's out of my world. I'm a nobody. I'm a sports card nobody. That's for somebody else, right? I'm nowhere in that lane. But for folks that are, no matter what it is, if you're buying something you love, judging folks about that just kind of irks me the wrong way. I wish that we could just support one another, enjoy what we're doing, enjoy the fact that we're literally collecting little pieces of cardboard with people on it. You know, it's silly if you really, step back and think about it, and it should be fun. So that's the biggest thing that I would definitely clean up is just try to get folks to be more supportive and have more fun with it. So that's where I
Yeah,
kind of lie.
I like it. Great answer. I'll say this and just sort of to kind of close that question. I think you agree. Some of that comes from places of jealousy, right? When especially if it's an expensive card, it's easier to take a pot shot at someone. 'Cause a lot of times, because the people taking a pot shot wish they could be in that space. Rather, where you take the other line. Listen, I'm not in that space, but to each their own. If they can afford it, like let them enjoy the hobby just like we managed to enjoy the hobby. There is a segment though, that it just comes from a place of I wish I could do that, so I
Mm.
can't. So rather than support that person, I'll just take a cheap shot at them and like you said, call them dumb or stupid for
Yeah.
spending that sort of money. It's always going to be there. I hate to say it. I
Yep.
wish the magic wand was a real magic wand and not a pretend one that we can, where we could actually make it happen. But it is what it is. We just sort of got to, steer around that pothole in the road and sort of avoid it the best we can. Shane, I appreciate you coming on, man. I enjoyed getting to meet you in Atlantic City. I said we got to have you on here. Here we made it happen. For those that may not know about Sports Card Nobody, it's a great show. You can take my word for it. But where can give out all those social medias, where they can find the show and all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned it earlier, but you can find me on Instagram. It's where I'm probably the most active. I'm at Sports Card Nobody there. I'm on Twitter where I've become more and more active as well, but that's at Sport Card Nobody. And yeah, the show wherever you podcast, wherever you pod, you should be able to find it. Just search for Sports Card Nobody. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple Podcasts and all those fun things. So if you have podcasts, you can find it.
Well, you're a sports card somebody to me, and I think a lot of people would echo that sentiment. So, Shane,
I appreciate it.
thanks for chopping it up with me today.
Oh, my pleasure, man. You have a good one.